Hello, Angela Meiritz-Reid here, Stampin' Up demonstrator based in Christchurch, New Zealand. Today I'm sharing with you how I created this pretty handmade card using the Hydrangea Haven Stamp Set and coordinating Hydrangea Dies. I've also used this beautiful stitched Greenery Die in the background. Everything is carrying through into the new catalogue except for this paper. It was a host special, but there is a new DSP that's going to be coming. It's called Perfectly Penciled and it's full of beautiful black and white images, so there'll definitely be one of those papers that will work instead of this one. To get started, I've got a basic white card base and it's already folded and good to go, and I thought I'd show you. I store all my cardstock or white cardstock in this container ready to go. It just makes life a little bit easier. In the back here I've got card bases and they're all cut in half and folded, and then I've got white layers here. These ones are 5mm smaller. These are 1 centimetre smaller, and these are 1.5 centimetres smaller on each, you know, right around. And then as you know, I quite often use a layer, just some cardboard that will work underneath each one of these. So I'll just show you. So it's just slightly smaller, 5mm smaller. So I have those all in here ready to go behind the corresponding piece of white cardstock that I've cut down. Otherwise you can just use dimensionals, but I like using up bits of cardstock. So I just thought I'd show you how I store those. So we'll start with that, and then I've already got this piece of white cardstock that is slightly smaller, and I've got my stitch Greenery Die. So it's a lovely big die, so covers that piece perfectly. So I'll bring in my machine to die cut that. And just pop that on there. And run that through. There you can see add that beautiful stitch detail to that. I think it'll work really well on lots of cards, especially floral ones. It works really well. And then I've got a piece of this gingham paper, so I just want to work out what I want to see, and on this one I've chosen to use that darker one. So what I'm going to do is cut that down. I'm just going to cut off that white strip here and just cut enough just to have enough to adhere it underneath. I'll just run adhesive so it's plenty long enough. Just run some glue down there. Just pop that on there. So it's always good when there's something with lines. It certainly makes it easier to line everything up and get it nice and even. So it doesn't take much for that to adhere to that, and then we'll just trim off that top and bottom piece. And then because I have adhered that to that, it is now going to be slightly wider than the 9.5 that I originally had. So I'm just going to line that up to 9.5 now and trim that off. And then, as I was saying before, I've got these bits of cardboard that are slightly smaller, so I'm just going to adhere that to the back of there. And that will go straight onto the card front. And I don't go right to the edge with the glue because it does sort of seep out, and also it saves getting on my fingers. I know that I've got a wee bit of edge around there without glue. So get it nice and straight. And then quite often I'll just pop one of these big acrylic blocks over the top, just helps it stay in place while it adheres. Then I'm going to stamp this hydrangea image, and I'll bring in my foam mat and a piece of white cardstock and my hydrangea stamp. I'm just going to use Memento because I'm going to be using the Stampin blends. You just want to make sure you get good coverage on that stamp. And give it a good press down, make sure you've got well covered. And then I'm going to die cut that. So I'll just create a little bit of space on here. And I've got the die to cut around that. I want to make sure, actually work best, you probably have your own way too, that you work best from left to right or right to left. And if you're worried about it moving when it's on there, you can use some tape to keep it in place. I just have a few little bits of have been used a few times, so the stick might not be there. Just enough to keep it in place. That one's not going to stay. I'll grab another one while I'm here. There's nothing worse than going through and it moving. And then just pop your top plate on and run it through. And while I'm here, I'm just going to run the leaves through. I'm going to trim those down later, just onto a scrap piece of vellum. They're cute leaves, and they'll just add a nice wee subtle element to the back of the image we're using. So now I've got the Granny Apple Green and the Polished Pink blends. So what I've done is used the darker one to start with, and I've just used that small nib, so I have a little bit more control, and I've just gone in with the dark nib and run it over these veins in the leaf. Just really totally followed those lines. So super quick, super easy, and take a bit more care than me if you like, but just need to from here. Just take a lighter pen and run that down those stem. And then in here, all I've done is just randomly coloured it with a lighter one. And I haven't even been too particular for their little white gaps, left those a little bit too. And same on all three, just to give a quick I always find too, if you go around the edge first, then you've got a little bit of a buffer when you're colouring. And they soak in too, so you don't see the strokes so much. And if you wanted to add a bit more depth or a bit more blending, you can just add that lighter colour over the dark, and I'll just blend those in a little bit. So those are your leaves done, and you can see here I've done a similar sort of idea. I've done left some white gaps. So with the lighter colour, what I did was just went around all these petals. If colouring's not your thing, there are some stamps in there that I'll show you them to you if I can find my stamp set. There are these solid images here, so you can just stamp those and stamp them right onto here if you prefer not to colour in. But even with this, you don't have to be too particular. Just, as you can see, I am going quite quickly. It's always quite a good, if you're watching TV, do a bit of colouring, stack a pile up. Not so good when there are subtitles, so I found they can't read them and colour. So it doesn't take too long to get that colour on there. And just build it up and do those little dots in the middle too if you like. So just and then I sort of did a bit more just to fill in some of those. I didn't want too many to be too white, so fill in some of those just randomly. Sometimes we can worry too much that people will be analysing our cards, but they're just happy to receive a lovely handmade card that someone's taken some time to create. And then with the darker one, I've gone in and I have done those little dots in the middle, the flowers, the dark. And, you know, just random, doesn't matter if you miss some. And then just adding a little bit of pink, darker pink on some of those petals. Just to add a little bit of depth to the flower. Pending you know how dark you want your flower to be. And then when you're happy, I might even just add a little more of this, take away some of those white. I don't want it to be as quite as white. And that's it. That's all the colouring I did on that. And then what I want to do is I'm going to pop that onto my card. So just with some dimensionals, just going to give that a bit of height. Just a little half one down there. Not going to worry about the stem, it'll stay in place. And have the height from the other dimensionals, and then I just want it to go over the edge a little bit there, and the same with that. Just pop that in place, and then with these I've just popped them off. Yeah, probably were a little bit hard to see, they're just tucked in here and here. So I'll just grab a little bit of scrap paper and just pop a bit of glue on it, and I'll use the bigger leaf here. I'm just going to tuck that into there, and these smaller ones here just going to tuck. You can add them first if you know where you're going to put your floral image, so that you don't have to try and get it around dimensionals that are tucked in that are underneath. But where there's a will, there's a way. And then the next thing I'm going to do is add the bow, and I'm using the Simply Elegant trim, the gold one, to coordinate, because I'm going to stamp the sentiment in gold. So please, this is carrying through. So give that a really good tight tug, because it can loosen quite easily. So I've got it in mind of its own sometimes. And then just want to make sure the bow is nice and even, the loops. And then glue dots, I find a good thing for keeping that in place. And I'm just going to roll one up, pop it in on here, pop that on there. If it's not always doing what you want, you can, sometimes I'll add some extras to make sure it does. Oopsie, it's come off. Tuck that back in there. And that will flatten down once I put the sentiment on there. So they're pretty malleable, those glue dots, so you can play around with them a little bit. And then I'll just trim that off. Then I'm just going to do the sentiment, and I've got just going to put that on a little bit of scrap white. And that was another thing I thought I'd show you while I was here. So I've got this little box, and keep that full of little offcuts, which is handy. You know, sometimes you die cut something and don't end up using it, so sometimes it's quite nice to have a wee fossick through and find something, saves doing it again. And so I just need a small piece for my sentiment, and I'm going to throw my embossing buddy over that. And I've got the sentiment To an Incredible Woman, the same as that I've used on here, which I think it's Mother's Day coming up soon-ish, so that I think that's a great sentiment for a mum. Just want to, if I line that up with the bottom, that's one less. So we'll stamp the sentiment in Versamark, stamp that along the bottom there. Pop that out of the way, and then just add the gold embossing powder to the sentiment. Where I can, I like to use the straight edge, just one less edge to cut down. So I'll just take and emboss that. And trim that down. Reasonably close, and then just add that over the floral image. We'll just use a couple of little half dimensionals. I'll just pop those on the leaves. And tuck that sentiment out there. And then I've got these lovely classic matte dots that come in the 4 colours, and I'll just add those, 3 of those onto the card. Just like that, it brings the black in from the paper. And that's my card. So thank you very much for watching along. I hope you enjoyed the card, and see you again next week. Bye for now.